All opinions and quotations in no way represent River West Radio and are the sole responsibility of the producer, guests, and callers. River West Radio is not liable for any legal issues arising from the content of this program.
You are obsolete, Mr. Wordsworth. You have no function, Mr. Wordsworth. You're an anachronism, like a ghost from another time.
I am nothing more than a reminder to you that you cannot destroy truth.
You're a bug, Mr. Wordsworth, a crawling insect, an ugly, misformed little creature who has no purpose here, no meaning.
I am a human being. I exist. And if I speak one thought out loud, that thought exists, even after I'm shoveled into my grave.
Delusions, Mr. Wordsworth. Delusions, the Bible, poetry, essays of all kinds, all of it an opiate to make you think you have a strength when you have no strength at all. You have nothing but spindly limbs and a dream, and the state has no use for your kind.
Yeah? Well, we're gonna have to do something about that. This is RiverWestRadio.com, community-supported radio streaming live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm your host. My name is Michael Wordsworth, and welcome to Breaking Down the News, the show that presents the news highlights of the week, but with a twist. Breaking Down the News is more concerned in bringing you information that wasn't covered on the front pages. Headlines you don't want to miss, because not listening could be dangerous to your freedom, liberty, and health.
And good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday, August 15th, 2012 edition of Breaking Down the News. I am indeed Michael Wordsworth with Wordsworth Listening To. Today we are going to have a wonderful interview with Catherine Clyburn. She is a proactive member of Clark County and, quite frankly, an ordinary citizen, but with a great cause, and we have a lot to thank for people like her. She'll be coming on the show around the 4 o'clock hour today. Calling in from Clark County. She's the author and creator of electricalpollution.com. If you have not gone to this website, I recommend it. She spent quite an extensive amount of time putting together her material in order to inform us, the public, of the dangers of smart meters, EMF frequencies, why you should know the sorry about that Porky Pig moment there. The debilitating health hazards of electrical pollution. It's a very serious issue. We try to make light of some of these issues on the show. What are you going to do? We got plenty of news coming on the first half hour here. We're going to go into what's the Social Security Administration up to? What is the DHS up to? Department of Homeland Security. A lot of strange things going on behind the scenes. So we're going to cut to a station identification, a couple of commercials. We'll be right back with this heart-pounding news. Stay tuned.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. Are you tired of commercials always telling you that you're tired when you know you're tired because you wake up early and go to bed late, and every moment in between is spent trying to figure out how you're going to make that next dollar? Well, you're not alone. Millions of Americans are walking around in a sleep-deprived, zombie-like state, amplified by psych meds and pharmaceuticals found in the drinking water. So just be glad you're not one of them, unless you are, in which case I'm sorry you had to hear this. But wait, there's more. If we keep at this current pace, we will surely lose our democratic republic and soon be standing in food lines for the poisonous rations the new totalitarian government will hand out. Don't delay, get involved, get informed.
Social Security Administration to purchase 174,000 rounds of hollow point bullets. Preparing for civil unrest, ammunition to be delivered to 41 locations across the U.S. This article from Paul Joseph Watson, Infowars.com. First, it was the Department of Homeland Security, then it was the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and now the Social Security Administration is set to purchase 174,000 rounds of hollow point bullets that will be delivered to 41 locations across the country. Keep in mind that's roughly It's a lot of ammunition. Let's just put it that way. I'm going to break down the math later. What's actually been purchased in total is enough. It's 4 rounds for. It's more than 4 rounds for every man, woman, and child in the country. This recent purchase is just one of a few purchases that have been going on behind the scenes. Not much being said about it in the news. That's why I'm reading you this article today. A solicitation posted by the SSA on the FedBiz Ops website asks for contractors to supply 174,000 rounds of .357 SIG 125 grain bounded jacket hollow point pistol ammunition. An online ammunition retailer describes the bullets as suitable for peak performance, rivaling and sometimes surpassing hand loads in many guns, noting that the ammo is a great personal defense bullet. The synopsis to the solicitation adds that the ammunition is to be shipped to 41 locations within 60 days of purchase. A separate spreadsheet lists those locations, which includes the Social Security headquarters in Baltimore, Maryland, as well as major cities across the country, including Los Angeles, Detroit, Oklahoma, that's Oklahoma City, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Denver, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Seattle. Hollow point bullets are designed to expand as they enter into the body, causing maximum damage by tearing apart internal organs. Nothing nice there. It's not outlandish to suggest that the Social Security Administration is purchasing the bullets as part of a preparations for civil unrest. Social Security welfare is estimated to keep around 40% of senior citizens out of poverty. Should the tap run dry in the aftermath of an economic collapse, which the Federal Reserve has already told top banks to prepare for, domestic disorder could ensue if people are refused their benefits. Indeed, earlier this year, the Department of Homeland Security ran a drill called Operation Shield, which included turning the entrance of a Florida Social Security office into a checkpoint manned by Federal Protective Service officers armed with semi-automatic rifles. This quote, with their blue and white SUVs circled around Main Street, the Main Street office, that is, at least one official was posted on the door with a semi-automatic rifle, randomly checking identifications, and other officers, some with canines, sifted through the building. That, according to a report by the Daily Commercial. A rash of solicitations by federal agencies for hollow point bullets in recent months has stoked fears that the government is preparing for civil unrest caused by a financial collapse on a scale similar or even larger to scenes already witnessed in Europe over the last 2 years. As was reported yesterday, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has put out a contract for themselves for 46,000 rounds of hollow point bullets along with 500 paper targets. 500 paper targets, divide 46,000 rounds of hollow point bullets by 500 paper targets, and you'll find out this is more than just target shooting they're going through. Despite initially asking the bullets to be delivered to the National Weather Service, the NOAA claimed this was a clerical error and insisted the ammunition was being sent to the Fisheries Office of Law Enforcement. Well, there you go. Why powerful hollow point bullets that are designed to tear apart internal organs are needed for practice shooting at paper targets has not been explained. Back in March, Homeland Security purchased, now this is the number that I wanted to tell you folks. Back in March, Homeland Security purchased 450 million rounds of .40 caliber hollow point bullets that are designed to expand upon entry and cause maximum organ damage. And this prompts questions as to why the Department of Homeland Security needed such a large amount of powerful bullets merely for training purposes. That number, what was the exact number again here? I'm looking through the article. 450 million rounds. Okay, that's a lot of rounds. I mean, holy cow! There's 360 million people the last time I checked the census in America, and they got 450 million rounds. Well, that's more than enough for each one of us. Well, this information was followed by another Department of Homeland Security solicitation asking for a further, here we go, 750 million rounds of assorted bullets, including 357 mag rounds that are able to penetrate walls. So we've got two huge orders, 450 million rounds just being ordered by the DHS, and now they want a further 750 million rounds. Why is the National Weather, Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration they say it was a clerical error that they received 46,000 rounds of hollow point bullets, along with 500 paper targets. That would be a waste of hollow points. Not to mention, if I'm not mistaken, this is not my area of expertise, but hollow point rounds are illegal for the most part, if I'm not mistaken. But they're not when you're planning on using them on your civilian population to keep order. And the order they plan on keeping, oh, buddy, it's not going to be the Red Cross rolling in to save you that day. Nope. Apparently it's going to be DHS and a hollow point bullet telling you what to do. And that means you have the right to shut up and mind your own business and do what they tell you. I'm Michael Wordsworth. These are always words worth listening to. We'll be right back, and thank you for tuning in. We're going to have Catherine Kleiber coming up here real soon. Stay tuned. It's going to be a great show. Electrical pollution you need to know. It's for your life, liberty, and health. Definitely. Be right back.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. The kitchen is the heart of the home. But at Monsanto, we're a megalithic agricultural group attempting to destroy farmers all across your country. We bring you horrible foods that attack your stomach lining, DNA, give you kidney and liver failure. Monsanto, bringing Franken foods to your family at home. Don't you just hate us? Say no to GMO. It's like the roaring 20s all over again. The stock markets are well above 12,000. It's as if nothing could go wrong, or could it? The truth is, the American economy is not as strong as it actually appears. The job reports for June were down, manufacturing down. The actual CPI rate, if you adjusted it correctly, would show that unemployment is at a staggering 22%. 46 million Americans are on food stamps, and guess who runs that program? Not the government, no, Goldman Sachs. I'm telling you, the situation here is more abrupt than we think. Wake up, America. We have hard times coming. And we need to prepare for what lies ahead.
The Mississippi River is drying up. This report from the Economic Collapse on August 15, 2012. The worst drought in more than 50 years is having a devastating impact on the Mississippi River. The Mississippi has become very thin and very narrow, and if it keeps on dropping, there's a very real possibility that all river traffic could get shut down. And considering the fact that approximately 60% of our grain, 22% of our oil and natural gas, and 1/5 of our coal travel down the Mississippi River, that would be absolutely crippling for our economy. It has been estimated that if all the Mississippi River traffic was stopped, it would cost the U.S. economy $300 million a day. So far, most of the media coverage on this historic drought has focused on the impact that it is having on farmers and ranchers, but the health of the Mississippi River is also absolutely crucial to the economic success of this nation. And right now, the Mississippi is in incredibly bad shape. In some areas, the river is already 20 feet below normal, and the water is expected to continue to drop. If we have another 12 months of weather ahead of us, similar to what we have seen over the last 12 months, then the mighty Mississippi is going to be a complete and total disaster by this time next year. Most Americans simply do not understand how vitally important the Mississippi River is to all of us. If the Mississippi River continues drying up to the point where commercial travel is no longer possible, it would be an absolutely devastating blow to the U.S. economy. Make no mistake. Unfortunately, vast stretches of the Mississippi are already dangerously low. The following is an excerpt from a transcript of a CNN report that aired on August 14th. The transcript reads, "You might think that this is some kind of desert just outside of Memphis. It's not. I'm actually standing on the exposed bottom of the Mississippi River. That's how dramatic the drought impact is being felt here. Hard to believe. A year ago, we were talking about record flooding. Now they're worried about a new kind of record, a record low. The river was 3 miles wide at the point that this person was giving their account from. It's now down to 0.3 of a mile, and that's causing all kinds of problems. There are some benefits. I mean, take a look over here, New Beachfront. In fact, some quip that now the Mississippi River has more beaches than the entire state of Florida, which would be funny if it didn't have an impact on trade. A lot of stuff we use goes up and down the Mississippi River. We are talking steel, core, ore, grain. The problem is now a lot of those barges have had to lighten their loads, and even doing that, they are still running aground. There is a real fear that there could be a possibility of closing the Mississippi. If that happens, well, all that product that used to be carried cheaply by barge is now going to be carried more expensively by truck or train. And guess who's going to pay for all of that? Us, the consumers. It is, if you want, you can see video footage of what's happening along the Mississippi River. Just Google it, Mississippi drought. It is really amazing that last year we were talking about this historic flooding along the Mississippi, and this year we're talking about the Mississippi possibly drying up. As I mentioned earlier, there are some areas along the river that are already 20 feet below normal levels. And here, the following is from a recent article posted on the Inquisitor.com. This article quotes, "Just outside of Memphis, the river is 13 feet below normal depth, while the National Weather Service says Vicksburg, Mississippi is 20 feet below normal levels. Overall, the Mississippi is 13 feet below normal averages for this time of year. The drying up river is forcing barge, tugboat, and towboat operators to navigate narrower and more shallow spots in the river, slowing their speeds as they pass dangerously close to one another. In some parts of the Mississippi River is so narrow that one-way traffic is being utilized. A lot of barges have been forced to go with greatly reduced loads so that they will sit higher in the river, and other commercial craft have been forced to stop operating completely. For example, the Mississippi has dropped so low at this point that the famous American Queen steamboat can no longer safely navigate the river. Down south, the Mississippi has gotten so low that the salt water is actually starting to move upriver. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is fighting hard to keep that contained. Other waterways in the middle part of the country are in even worse shape. For example, a 100-mile stretch of the Platte River has already dried up. Millions of fish are dying as rivers and streams all over the country continue to get shallower and warmer as a result of ongoing drought. The last time the condition of the Mississippi River was this bad was back in 1988. At that time, a lot of barge traffic was stopped completely, and the shipping industry lost approximately $1 billion. If a similar thing were to happen now, the consequences could potentially be far worse. As I wrote about recently, a standstill along the Mississippi would cost the U.S. economy about $300 million a day. In fact, one towing company that works the Mississippi says that it's already been losing about $500,000 a month since May. In the end, who's going to pay for all this? You and I will. In fact, this crisis could end up costing American consumers a lot more money. So here's the math. If you want to raise the average barge 1 inch above the water, you've got to take off 17 tons of cargo. To raise it a foot, you're talking 200 tons. And since, according to the American Waterways operators, moving cargo by river is $11 a ton cheaper than by train or truck, the more that now has to be moved on land, well, the more the costs are going to go up. Stephen Barry says, quote, "And eventually the consumer is going to pay that price somewhere along the line. And considering the fact that we have already facing a potential food crisis due to the drought, the last thing we need to do is for the Mississippi River to dry up." So is there any hope on the horizon for the Mississippi? Unfortunately, things do not look promising. The fall and the winter are typically drier than the summer is along the Mississippi. That means that conditions along the river could actually get even worse in the months ahead. The following is from a recent Time magazine article, and I quote, "But without significant rainfall, which isn't any long-range forecast, things are likely to get worse. As summer turns to fall, the weather tends to get drier. Lower temperatures generally mean fewer thunderstorms and less rainfall. Take away the thunderstorm mechanism and you run into more serious problems," says Alex Sosnowski, expert senior meteorologist for AccuWeather.com. And while droughts tend to be a temporary setback, longer-range forecasts are troublesome. Sosnowski says he's anticipating an El Nino weather pattern next year, which would mean below normal snowfall and above average temperatures. Let us hope and pray that we don't see another 12 months similar to the 12 months that we have just been through. The U.S. economy is already in bad enough shape. We don't need any more major problems on top of what we're already dealing with. So what do you think? What are your thoughts? Today we're going to have Catherine Kleiberg come on in just a moment. It's going to be a great interview. We're going to be covering electrical pollution, and believe me, it's a must-hear episode. Again, very, very important to your health, your family's health, and if we act together, we could actually do something to turn back this tide of smart meters and cell phone towers, at least get things back to the point where they're relatively safe. A lot of money's not being spent on keeping us safe, and quite frankly, the American public isn't being informed, nor are they paying attention to this crucial issue. I'm Michael Wordsworth. You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. This is Breaking Down the News. We'll be right back.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com.
And now it is time to make light of the issues.
Economists, that's right, economists. You know they're about the most useless thing. They're paid to be wrong 2/3 of the time. And I'm telling you, our economy, they keep telling us our economy is getting better, right? Right? I mean, what a joke. It's like Hitler reporting back to the German people that he's winning the war. Isn't it? Isn't it? I mean, just look at the jobs market right now. It's just ridiculous, huh? We must be having a jobless recovery. A jobless recovery. You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. The TSA has consistently made the news with bad reports about its moral conduct, questionable employees, civil rights violations, everything from workers stealing cash out of travelers' luggage to trafficking drugs through airport security gates. Congresswoman Blackburn recently brought to the news media an awareness of the TSA's hiring of known child molesters and child porn collectors. My question is, why are we putting up with this? Why have we become so tolerant of being peasant slaves that we will acquiesce to anything? I've come to the DFW International Airport outside Dallas, Texas, to ask some questions of ordinary passengers and to interview the TSA workers themselves. Let's go in and see what they have to say.
I don't like what I have to put up with every time I fly.
Ted Wilsonberg travels by plane frequently and has to get groped on a regular basis. But does he have to put up with this?
No. Hell no. I'd keep these guys out of here if I could.
So you don't think that we need to be molested in the interest of national security?
No. Think about it. A police officer can't just come up and put their hands in your crotch. But these guys feel me up every time I pass through these gates.
But why do you put up with it?
I have to do this. My job depends that I fly 3 to 4 times a week. I have a family, you know?
The TSA stands for total suckasses when it comes to trampling on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. How do they get away with it? I asked the director of security here at the airport at Dallas-Fort Worth. Yeah, well, when you pass through them doors, them front doors of this airport, you're no longer in America, boy. You're now in international territory bound by international law. And that's the great secret. The Constitution of the United States does not apply in its airports. Since September 11th, 2001, the Bill of Rights has been circumvented because of the threat of terrorism, when in actuality, you're more likely to die from a bee sting or be struck by lightning than actually be affected by terrorists.
All right, we are back. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to see, Catherine, do we have you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Let me just do a sound check and make sure your voice is good. Welcome to the show. I've been plugging you all week here, telling everybody that you'll be coming on air, and we just really want to thank you for joining us. First off, could you maybe just start by telling us a little bit about yourself? I already told them that you have the website at electricalpollution.com, that you've been an advocate for many years. Of course, some of the details, I'm sure you could fill us in. How did you start with this? What was the issue that basically got you into this issue?
I became interested in the issue of radio frequency sickness and electrical pollution because I got radio frequency sickness. It got misdiagnosed or diagnosed, I guess, in the medical community as chronic fatigue syndrome. But when I eliminated my exposure to radio frequencies from electrical pollution, I got better, which is an uncommon outcome for chronic fatigue syndrome patients. They generally don't get better because there's no, in the medical community, there's no known cause and no known cure for chronic fatigue syndrome.
And
However,
what kind of symptoms were you experiencing? Nausea, lethargy?
I was having problems with sleeping properly. I had problems with energy. I had problems with muscle weakness. I had cardiac issues. When I'd go up the stairs, I'd end up being very lightheaded. I wouldn't have, I'd have to bend over at the top of the stairs. When I would stand for a period of time, especially, say, if I had my hands in the sink and I were capping strawberries, I'd end up feeling lightheaded. And it all came together for me when I found out about electrical pollution, and I had measurements done in my home. And I discovered that it was exposure to high frequencies on the wiring and exposure to actual electrical contact currents with high frequencies and the regular 60 cycle, which is what we pay for, on our plumbing. And that was why when I stood at the sink with my hands in the sink capping strawberries, I was getting lightheaded.
Wait, explain this to me, because this is actually news. You're saying somehow the EMF pollution can transfer through metal plumbing.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, our plumbing is all hooked up to our electrical service. Many people don't know that the National Electrical Safety Code requires there to be bonding between the electrical box, your main box in your basement. Usually it's in your basement. It can be your garage or wherever, but your main electrical box and your plumbing. It's for grounding purposes, and at the time that it was originally done, the idea was that access to the extensive underground network of metal pipes provided a good way to provide grounding for the system should there be a fault or a lightning strike or whatever. It could go straight down into the earth.
I see, and that's I guess that's why sometimes we get that phenomenon of an electric shower when your electricity backs up through your house, through the ground, and you actually turn on water that's electrified. I guess it'd be for the same reason.
And most people don't, when they turn it on and it's electrified, it's usually at a low enough level that they don't get a shock off of it, but often people will end up with a flushed face, and not flushed from the heat of the shower, flushed from the electrical contact that's happening through the water. So often flushed and splotchy.
I see.
Or people, in severe cases, they end up lightheaded in the shower.
Okay.
Yes,
That's so you're saying possibly one thing right off the bat. If somebody, I'm going to read a list of the symptoms that you sent here. If anybody out there listening is suffering from any of these, you might want to consider EMF pollution, electrical pollution, as the cause. Your doctor may or may not pick up on this, nor be concerned or even aware that this is an issue. Listen to some of these symptoms that Catherine has sent to us. Insomnia, which she mentioned, unrefreshing sleep, just not getting a decent night, probably failing to get into the deep REM sleep that we need. Headaches, migraine headaches specifically, facial flushing, which she just mentioned when you're taking a shower, rash, joint pain, anxiety, irritability, asthma, that's amazing. I would have never thought that, actually. Short-term memory loss, a lot of us are just doing our best to keep their brains together these days, so it might be hard to notice that one. But, hey, have you considered maybe it's not you? Maybe it's the electrical pollution. Cognitive difficulties. Again, sometimes a trouble spot for many of us out there. Elevated blood sugar, cardiac. Could you help me out with this, Catherine?
Arrhythmias.
Arrhythmias.
So if your heart isn't beating quite the way it's supposed to, that can mean it beats too fast, it beats too slow, it beats irregularly.
And abnormal blood pressure. Now, I'd like to go over the specific sources of radio frequency radiation. And if you're listening out there to this today with this, we're talking with Catherine Kleiber. She's the creator and author of the articles on the website, electricalpollution.com. She became active when this pollution was specifically affecting her. She looked into the issue and found a wide gamut of electrical pollution sources, some of which we have here. Transmitting utility meters. Okay, what would that be?
Okay.
Is that the smart meters?
Yeah, so just to briefly back up, those symptoms that you read are the symptoms of radio frequency sickness that are, most common. So those symptoms of radio frequency sickness can come from, any number of different sources of radio frequencies. So electrical pollution is one that everybody obviously should check out, but transmitters, so sources of radio frequency radiation that's being used for communication purposes, are another one. So anything that is wireless is a radio frequency transmitter, and what's being used most commonly these days is pulse-modulated microwaves, and that would apply with the transmitting utility meters, which are also called AMR, AMI,
Catherine,
smart meters, and there's a whole other alphabet soup worth of names that they put on them.
Catherine,
but if they transmit, they would come under that transmitting utility meters.
And these meters are basically the digital meters we find on our homes and businesses. Our city switched over to them years ago. Catherine, my question is, compared to a microwave oven, what is the strength of these smart meters? Do you have any idea?
That's an interesting question, because microwave ovens transmit a very strong power because they're designed to cook things. It doesn't really make sense necessarily to compare the strength of a microwave oven to the strength of the transmitter, because they're designed for two entirely different things. Hypothetically, the microwaves in your microwave oven are supposed to stay there. They don't always. And the microwaves put out by the transmitting utility meter are meant to go out and communicate information to the utility. And making a comparison there, which often is what's done by engineers, they say, oh, well, that it's a minuscule amount of radiation coming off of the transmitting utility meter compared to a microwave oven. But it would be kind of silly like saying, well, there's a minuscule amount of mercury in the fish you're catching in the lake that you're not supposed to eat very much of.
That's
compared
a great
to what's in a mercury thermometer.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Definitely.
And that sort of comparison is very misleading and disingenuous because you're comparing apples and oranges. The microwave radiation from these communication devices, while it's much lower than what's in a microwave oven, can have very serious biological effects. And our safety standards, safety guidelines that are promulgated, that have been adopted by the FCC in our country, are not designed to protect the population from biological effects during chronic exposures. They are only designed to protect a 6-foot-tall, 185-pound male during a 6-minute exposure, because they were originally designed to protect technicians who were going up on fixing towers and such.
Oh, I see. And so that would be a short-term exposure from their standpoint.
Right, that's a short-term exposure. That's not talking about your exposure when you carry your cell phone around every day, or every day you're sitting in front of your Wi-Fi on your computer, your iPad, you pick your favorite transmitting device, your baby monitor.
I was just going to say, here's a horrible scenario. Everybody listening should immediately find out where your smart meter is on your home, because what if you had your child or your baby in a crib or in their bed, sleeping on the other side of a wall, a foot or two from the smart meter? This would be indeed tragic, and the health effects that they could be experiencing would directly be caused. Catherine, my next question, because I know there's people listening out there, they would ask these questions too. How often do these smart meters pulse out this microwave frequency?
Well, it can vary from utility company to utility company, but the We Energies meters, which I'm pretty sure is what you have in your area in Milwaukee, pulse every, I think it was 6 seconds. If it's not 6 seconds, right. It was 4 seconds.
No, I believe 6 or 4. In other words, a very short period of time, roughly 15 to 20 times a minute. And my next question would be, do they all pulse simultaneously? In other words,
I really don't even know the answer to that question, but even if they're not pulsing simultaneously, it's every 4 or 6 seconds. How much can you do in 4 or 6 seconds?
Well, it's 15 or 20 times a minute. You're getting bombarded with this low frequency microwave energy. Would it be low frequency?
I don't even think it's low frequency. It's quite a high frequency.
Low amplitude. Sorry.
It's not a low amplitude.
Really? Well,
they
even
claim
worse.
that it is, but
no.
Again, with the comparison of the microwave oven, which, as we discussed earlier, is kind of irrelevant, that the radiation coming off of one of those smart meters overwhelms the HF35C for about 10 to 15 feet away. So the HF35C has a range up to 2,000 microwatts per meter squared. And the signal, you have to get about 10 to 15 feet away before you can even start taking a reading that doesn't say overload when that signal goes off.
I see. In fact, they do sell, I saw online, actually I saw on your website, if I'm not mistaken, a device that measures electrical pollution, but maybe we can talk about that later with solutions.
That's a separate device, because the HF35C measuring this transmission measures what's coming through the air. And there is a meter that measures what's on the wiring. It's a Graham-Stetzer microsurge meter, or a Stetzerizer meter. They've had a couple, different names over the years. But that measures what's on the wiring only. This measures what's coming through the air only.
Oh, that's what we want. We want that device.
Well, both of them are very useful in their own different ways, because the one that measures what's on the wiring measures your electrical pollution exposure.
Oh, okay.
Which has been documented to be associated with cancer and
okay, so I get it. So the wires that run through the walls in the ceilings, not many run through the floors, but they actually might run below them. You're saying that those themselves are putting out an EMF field that's hazardous to biological people
that's the
like
electrical pollution that originally made me sick.
I see.
And so all of these energy-efficient devices, maybe we should back up and explain a little bit about electrical pollution quickly.
Very good.
Electrical pollution is pollution of that 60-cycle sine wave. When you're getting electricity, what you're paying for is a 60-cycle sine wave, and it should look like a very nice, smooth wave that goes up and down 60 times in a minute. And what has happened is, over the years, we've changed the way we use electricity. So we originally started out with just incandescent light bulbs and, electric stoves and that kind of thing. But what it does is it uses energy off that sine wave, but it doesn't change the way it looks. And now we're, with our modern devices and our energy-efficient lights and our electronics and stuff, the sine wave gets distorted. There's a lot of, every time you turn something on and off, it sends a transient, and the way these devices use electricity makes this sine wave, instead of looking nice and smooth now, it looks all hairy from all of this high-frequency energy that has ended up on it from the way we use electricity.
It looks more like the dialogue on a recording, where little spikes, short, high-amplitude periods.
Yes.
Just erratic. And now, am I to understand, though, that the 60 hertz cycle was safer or tolerable for human health, or is that just bad to begin with?
Well, what seems to be the case, for one thing, I don't believe that we've ever really had a clean 60 cycle sine wave. It got worse in the 70s with the oil embargo and the energy-efficient lights. But prior to that, we had problems with, first, they didn't have a return wire, so it was returning through the earth.
Oh, right.
So
Pam
you're standing
mentioned
on
that.
it. And that is happening to a degree now because the return wire is not properly sized anymore for what we're doing with the electricity. That's where, the whole issue of it being on your plumbing comes in.
Let me tell the listeners, actually, or explain a little bit, and you can explain further, but Pam Jaffke mentioned that last time she was on the show, and I'm glad you mentioned it because I almost forgot about that. There's so much to keep in our heads. Basically, when you say a return wire, and I didn't know this till Pam or yourself mentioned it, basically we have, it's like a water hose, for example, and the electrical energy that's constantly being pumped through the lines, if it's not used, it has nowhere to go, and it just basically sits there like an electromagnetic pool of a hazard. And you're talking about a wire that the electric company could put in and would not cost that much to return this extra electricity back into the system safely, away from harm.
Yeah, what's happening right now is that the return wire was sized, again, for back when we had only these linear loads, these loads that only used the sine wave to take energy but didn't mess with the actual frequencies of it. So it still looked fairly smooth. And what I was saying is I don't think it was ever completely clean because we had some split bolt connections that would have loosened up, and there would have been high-frequency events from that, and there were we used a lot more brush motors back then, so those would have put out high frequencies. So people may have created their own dirty environments or through neglect allowed that to happen. So I don't think that it was always entirely clean, and then the 70s happened and we got this oil embargo. But when the 70s happened, we really started putting high frequencies back on the wiring on purpose. Everyday people didn't know that was happening, but the engineers knew that was happening. And at that time, the IEEE recommended installing a return wire that would be 225, and it might be actually 224, but, quibble over 1%, times larger than the hot wires. And the reason for that is because with all of these high-frequency events on this, the sine waves don't cancel like they're supposed to. So you end up with more electricity returning over the wire than you used to have. And because those wires, those neutral wires, if you look up as you're walking along or driving next time, the neutral wire is the bottom wire. And don't mistake your cable wires for a neutral wire, but it's the bottom electrical wire.
Right. There's three plugs. One's a hot, one's a neutral, one's a ground.
Right, but on the wiring in your distribution system, you usually have 3 phase wires up above and 1 neutral down below, or 1 phase wire up above and 1 phase wire down below if it's a single phase circuit.
Right.
So you have 2 choices there, but it's that bottom wire should be larger by double and a bit then the top wires, and almost nowhere will you see that. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you see it's the same size. Often, it's about a quarter size. That's what they used to use, the top wires. And what happens then is that the current that is supposed to be flowing on that wire, as the engineers put it, sees too much resistance. And so what happens is that electricity flows the path of least resistance or least impedance. And so this electricity then can go down the grounding rods, which are directly connected to the neutral wire, to the ground, to the earth, in order to protect them from lightning strikes, is the original reason. Well, when we started having such an overloaded neutral, it was apparently causing fires. So the solution, instead of upgrading the neutral size, was to increase the number of grounding rods. And that way, the electricity could just go down the grounding rods, flow across the earth, and back to the substations or generating plants.
Wow. I mean,
so it's kind of like letting your sewage run wild, except that it doesn't smell as much.
Right. In fact, it's virtually indetectable by any human sense. But now, when you said that, I just imagined all of this electricity seeking its path of least resistance, trying to return back without any direction.
And so that's where the plumbing comes in, because you have that connection from your box straight down to your plumbing right within your house. And so right there is a path of least resistance, and plumbing has a lot of surface area, and the high frequencies like to travel on surface area. And so there you have one way that your electricity actually ends up on your plumbing. And so people can end up with facial flushing. People can have the facial flushing when exposed to high frequencies in general without actually being in a shower. But I mentioned it specifically related to the shower because I remember several cases of people specifically experiencing facial flushing and blotchiness on their face related to showering. And I thought that might ring a bell for a couple listeners.
Maybe I actually have a, not that this helps for this issue, but I use a water purifier on my drinking water and my shower, specifically for the trimethyl halides, chlorine gas. I don't want to be chloroformed like they did to the poor Jews in Nazi Germany. So that's why I have that filter, but there's a few other, you've got about 4 other main sources of electrical pollution. I wanted to make sure that we cover them. We just discussed the fact that there's not a big enough return wire to assimilate all this excess flow of electricity, and that dumps us, pollutes our environment, just basically everywhere.
Yeah.
It's hard to say where and what. What other sources, other than the smart meters and the electrical flow, what other threats do we face from EMF pollution?
Well, other important sources of radio frequency radiation people should be aware of are Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is, and many people tend to think of, if people think about the technology behind wireless, they tend to think of it as magic. Some people think that if the transmitter transmits, it transmits directly from the transmitter to wherever it's going, and there's just like this magic, line, one straight line and nothing else. And some people tend to think of it as coming off in an even, even way all around. So it would be kind of a shade of gray all around that transmitter. Okay. And it really doesn't quite do either one of those. It goes out, so different antennas are different. Some of them are omnidirectional, meaning it goes out in all directions, and some of them are specifically directional, and it goes out then in whatever that specific direction is. But most of the antennas being used today with the wireless devices, because they are after making sure you get the best signal possible wherever you are omnidirectional. At least that's what I seem to be finding when I've measured. And what that means is you've got radiation coming off of that antenna 360 degrees, but it's not necessarily entirely even. So there can be higher areas of higher concentration coming off of that.
Kind of like a cone within the sphere.
Yeah,
radiating
kind
from
of.
the center.
Yeah, like
little
lines
beams.
within it.
Basically, yeah, the radius, radium, radii.
Right. So I did some measuring recently at a couple of homes, and one of the things that really jumped out were their decked cordless phones. So even people who have landlines often have cordless phones on them, and unless they haven't upgraded their phone within the last few years, they probably have a decked phone, and most of them say decked phone on them. If you look on the front face, it will say that.
Okay.
And those phones transmit, and I measured this, like a couple different phones, continuously, whether you're using them or not. And they are quite a strong signal. I had to get about 10 to 15 feet away from it before I could even get a reading below overload. And so if people are experiencing symptoms, that would be a good one to pull the plug on.
I see, and boy, that's a great point. A lot of people out there are on cordless landlines. It kind of defeats the whole purpose of having a landline. What about the decked? What does decked stand for?
They
DECT.
changed it, actually.
So
It's
direct.
a digital. One time it was digital European and cordless telephone or something like that.
Got you. Okay, and
And I think it's also been digital electronic cordless. I don't know. So
I see.
it doesn't matter. It just says decked.
Okay,
You
I
don't
was
have
just
to know what it stands for.
Got you. And there's baby
And
monitors.
they also make decked baby monitors. And I haven't measured one myself, but I have heard that they're every bit as bad. And certainly that's not something you want next to your child.
No.
Because there have been studies linking cell phone usage during pregnancy with behavioral issues in the child postnatally. So the study was pre- and postnatal cell phone use, and that was quite a large study. And there was a link with hyperactivity and so forth.
That's just horrible. I mean, this is actually a very rare, not commonly known issue. I talk to people in our community here, and quite frankly, this is something over the years I've heard about electrical pollution, but because the mainstream media isn't pounding it out, and because obviously you've been an advocate against this for quite some time. You've done the best you could, but still there's an amazing lack of awareness of just how important this electrical pollution is. And quite frankly, people every day are quite used to somebody telling them, oh, this will make you unhealthy or sick. I mean, we've become numb to these warnings, haven't we?
Well, and I can understand that. I mean, it can be overwhelming, but there are some things that, you might notice a small change if you change it, and there are some things that are a profound change. And these changes have been, by and large, a profound change for people. I received a contact, kind of I sent out a message, and it got forwarded on through a couple of different layers of people away from me, And then I got it back with this gentleman ended up shutting off his Wi-Fi, which apparently he'd had in a room with himself, pretty much 24/7 since he put it in, which unfortunately is the way people often use Wi-Fi, as they turn it on and leave it on. And he had blood pressure, very high blood pressure, and it was not being controlled by medication, and it was seriously affecting his quality of life. And what he sent back was, after getting the message, he turned off his Wi-Fi just to try it.
Really?
What is it? What's the big deal about doing that for a couple days? So he turned it off, and within a couple days, his blood pressure had been so high. From my understanding, it sounded like his blood pressure practically dropped in half within a couple days of turning off the Wi-Fi router.
Anyway,
it was noticeable decrease. And he commented that he was finally able to walk to the mailbox at something approaching a reasonable speed for the first time in a couple of years.
Wow.
So we're not talking, when I'm talking about health changes that people notice with, eliminating their exposure, we're not talking about minor changes in health, usually. Healthy individuals who just eliminate their exposure on principle often will notice like a sense of peace or maybe a greater sense of well-being.
Okay.
But people who are having specific symptoms often notice tremendous differences. And did it make him into an Olympic athlete overnight? No, but to be able to walk at a reasonable speed to the mailbox instead of a shuffle was a noticeable change and made a big difference in his quality of life.
Sure.
And there have been, other people. One of the things I mentioned is there are some medical conditions that not, exclusively, not everybody with this condition necessarily, but in a large number of cases, they seem to be related to radio frequency exposure. One of them is chronic fatigue syndrome. If you look at the symptoms and you look at the symptoms of radio frequency sickness, you will see that they overlap to a large extent. However, chronic fatigue syndrome, as it's diagnosed, is kind of a catch-all category, so everybody with chronic fatigue syndrome may not respond. But often, very, very, very often, people with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, notice incredible differences in how they're doing if they can clean up their radio frequency environment. And nowadays, when I first started working on this issue, you just had to clean up your electrical pollution exposure. Now you have to worry about your wireless radiation exposure as well, and you have to do the two at once to really notice that real difference. There also seems to be a link between EMF or an RF exposure to Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS and Alzheimer's disease.
That's interesting. That's I'm sure a lot of people would like to hear that. I've heard other things, fluoride, fluorosilicic acid in the water is linked to that now too, as well as many causes, aren't there?
Well, there's always many factors to something, but the ones that I'm aware of, there does seem to be a EMF link for sure. That was in a California Health Department report, 10 years ago, as to a relationship with, Alzheimer's and Lou Gehrig's. Those ones I'm not as aware of people recovering related to cleaning up their electrical environment, but I would assume that it can't hurt. But certainly the chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and multiple sclerosis, people seem to recover a lot.
Well, Catherine, we're going to take a short station ID, and when we come back, we talk about more of these issues and how they're affecting our health. I'm Michael Wordsworth. We're listening with Catherine Kleiber. She's the author of electricalpollution.com. Thank you for tuning in today. It is going to be to your benefit. We'll be right back.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. Are you tired of commercials always telling you that you're tired when you know you're tired because you wake up early and go to bed late and every moment in between is spent trying to figure out how you're going to make the next dollar? Well, you're not alone. Millions of Americans are walking around in a sleep-deprived, zombie-like state amplified by psych meds and pharmaceuticals found in their drinking water. So just be glad you're not one of them, unless you are. In which case, I'm sorry you had to hear this. But wait, there's more. If we keep at this current pace, we will surely lose our democratic republic and soon be standing in food lines for the poisonous rations the new totalitarian government will hand out. Don't delay. Get involved. Get informed.
And now, live from River West Radio, the man with Wordsworth listening to, your host, Michael Wordsworth.
We're back. We are on the line with Catherine Kleiber, activist, thank goodness for people like herself. She took note quite some time ago of the effects of magnetic frequency pollution that pervades our environment, mostly in the city. If you get out of the country, you're going to experience somewhat of a diminished effect. Catherine, hi, are you still with us there?
I am.
Thank you for that commercial break. It's just we like to get that out there and just recap the station identification here. We were talking about medical conditions that seem to be related to radio frequency exposure. Some of them that we've mentioned: chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, Alzheimer's, and cancer. You've got down here the Austrian Medical Association guidelines. Could you mention that for a second?
Oh, sure. Just recently, like within the last couple of weeks, the Austrian Medical Association came out with guidelines for treating people who have EMF-related illnesses. And they're really very preliminary initial guidelines, and they acknowledge that fact. But it's a real step forward because one of the problems has been that the traditional medical doctors have not recognized EMF or radio frequency exposures as causing illness. And so people who have gone in with symptoms that should be pretty indicative of radio frequency sickness, especially if they've been tested and they don't have any of the illnesses that would be confounded with that they can easily test for, hypothyroid, whatever, various things. They don't recognize. They kind of throw up their hands and they put you in a category like chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia. And so this is going to be, I think, very, very useful for people in being able to get their doctors to recognize what's going on. In other countries, and they mention this in the guidelines, a couple other countries acknowledge disability being caused by radio frequency and EMF exposures.
So this is a global problem, Ricardo. Yeah, I mean, I understand that the Europeans use a slightly different phase and circuit than we do, but they're still experiencing telephones, the decked phones, as they call them. So, and you're saying that their medical associations recognize this as a debilitating cause worthy of...
Well, the Austrian Medical Association just recently came out with that recognition and guidelines for treatment. So that's a real step forward, and other countries over there have recognized disability caused by what they call EHS, or electrical hypersensitivity. But that I tend to believe is just simply radio frequency sickness. Because once you have radio frequency sickness, it's not like if you get radio frequency sickness from one source, other sources just still don't bother you. It's all sources are a problem. And we have enough high-frequency pollution on our electrical systems that those systems, if somebody would get radio frequency sickness, say, from a transmitter, those systems are still going to make them sick because there's so much high-frequency energy on them. And if they would get it from the electrical pollution source, transmitters still make you sick. So I think that part of the problem has been, up until recently, and even still to a large degree currently, the two sources are separated. Like, the thought is that this one has this effect and this one has this effect, instead of recognizing that the origin might be slightly different, but the effect is the same, and they're basically the same sort of toxin.
Indeed. Well, we've made the case here with your help that this is indeed a problem. Perhaps would you like to discuss some of the solutions that we could take?
Certainly. People who are curious about this and interested can go to electricalpollution.com, and on the solutions page there is a comprehensive list. I have it broken down into two sections, one dealing with electrical pollution and one dealing with transmitters, as to what particular steps people can take. But as a quick overview for the rest of you, I think a first easy step is to go around and unplug all your transmitters.
What kind of transmitters? You're talking about Wi-Fi, radios, TVs?
generally speaking, don't transmit unless you've got a special type.
Okay.
But your standard radio is a receiver, not a transmitter, and that's the same generally with TVs, although I know that there are fancier ones that do transmit. So if you're able to affect what's happening on a satellite somewhere, that's the transmitter.
Okay.
But otherwise, those are generally speaking receivers. What I would be thinking of with transmitters would be those DECT cordless phones, your Wi-Fi. Most computers these days, if you have a laptop, which a lot of people do, they have transmitters in them. And many computers, you can turn those off without affecting the rest of the functions of your computer, and then you can use a wired connection, cable, DSL, whatever, to get your information in and out of the computer. iPads transmit. I believe a lot of those devices you have to put in airport, and sometimes that's not always a guarantee. You need to check, airport mode or airplane mode. I'm sorry. You need to check your directions, but that should at least give a start at shutting off transmitters in those devices.
You've got dimmer switches and halogen lights. I was surprised to see that.
I was gonna move from the transmitters now onto the electrical pollution.
Okay,
and on the electrical pollution side, so dealing with the high frequencies on your wiring, dimmer switches are a big polluter.
That's horrible. I love dimmer switches. I do.
Oh boy, you should get one of the meters, the microsurge meter, the Stetzer meter, and plug it in and play with your dimmer switches, because they are awful. And you can probably, you can get the meter and try it in your home, but I've seen it in numerous homes where you can plug the meter in some remote part of the home, and you can play with the dimmer switch in the other room, and you'll still be able to see it.
This is horrible, because basically what it comes down to is our entire modern era is driven off of these electrical pollution devices. Even a dimmer switch.
If you like mood lighting.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any solutions? Use three-way?
Yeah, three-way lights are great.
Oh, okay. Great.
Because
thank you.
It's 3 separate filaments in there. And so you turn it one click for the lowest filament, and another click for the next higher filament, and another click for the next higher filament. And the benefit of it is that the different filaments, like if you use the lowest filament, you're actually saving energy where you don't with a dimmer switch.
I see. Boy.
So that would be my suggestion on
thank
mood
you.
lighting.
That helps me a lot. I can't stand having the overhead glare continuously, and I suppose I could use lamps, but then I got to go out and buy lamps, and I don't have many. So
yeah.
Okay.
And otherwise, you can just put in lower wattage light bulbs, and you'll save electricity and save on your electric bill.
Well, thank you. That's going to help you're going to save a lot of dates and romantic evenings for many listeners out there, and we can be spared electrical pollutions. Remember, before you go on, invite that special person back to your house. Make sure you get rid of all your transmitters first. Get rid of all the things, the DECT phones, anything like the wireless, all that. Get rid of that. And then stop using your dimmer. Switch to 3-way lights. Now, the next point you have here, have an electrician bypass or remove variable speed frequency drives where possible. You're going to have to help me with this one. Never heard of this before.
Well, to save an itty bit of energy, they've started using variable speed frequency drives. And what they do is they kind of are a way to, they're like a dimmer switch for a motor.
I see.
So it
same
kind of ramps it up.
Yes.
And those are highly polluting, and they continue to be highly polluting even once the motor, often anyway, even once the motor is running full out.
You have, without appropriate filters, do they actually have filters to filter out some of this?
Well, see, the electrical pollution side, it's all a question of engineering.
Of course.
And up until, still, engineers are taught that high-frequency energy, because if you look at the voltage of the 60 cycle that's supposed to be there. It's 120 volts, and if you look at the voltage on the high frequencies, it's, a volt or two, maybe.
Okay.
So they're taught that that's totally insignificant.
We're running up to the top of the hour, and I want to get through these
Sure.
other solutions. You got touch lamps, plasma TVs, and most compact fluorescent bulbs.
Yep.
Wow. But
A
that's
lot
half
of
of
the
our
compact
house.
fluorescent light bulbs are very polluting, and they radiate as well.
Oh, and those, Governor Walker, somebody, a congressman, somebody here, I'm going to have this other gentleman on. He was just talking about how they signed a deal with GE to get those fluorescent bulbs. Oh, no, now I know what it is. We had a local news anchor here, and he was promoting the fluorescent bulbs, innocently thinking that he was going to save the environment, as that's what they're billed to do. But it turns out that you can't throw them away. They got mercury in them, and you don't want to put that back in the environment. So I don't know what we're going to do, ship them out to space. But the trend right now is, everybody get the compact fluorescent bulbs.
It is, but they're for all the reasons you mentioned, because people tend to throw them away instead of getting them properly recycled, and all of those other various reasons just having to do with, the day-to-day hazards of chemistry. They're bad, but they are also often very highly polluting of the electrical system. So they put out a lot of electrical pollution. And they also radiate that high-frequency energy off of the bulb. So they're really not a very healthy choice. So I've been kind of telling people to stock up on their incandescent light bulbs and just turn them off when they leave the room.
That sounds great. Right. I mean, what's wrong with that? Everything's, I tell you, if you look out at my dad lives out in Las Vegas, and it's just, he comes from the generation, and it's understandable. They were from the Depression. Always turn off the light, always turn off the light. And, I mean, that's fine. I'm all for saving energy. But the trend seems to be they want us peasants to live in the dark while they use as much electricity. I said, Dad, look at the Vegas Strip. They're using electricity.
Yeah, they are. But I guess looking at somebody else using a whole lot of electricity isn't a really good excuse for us to do the same.
Right.
And I think that there's a very, I think that the compact fluorescent light bulbs were seen as a way by a lot of people to have your cake and eat it too. You don't have to tell people to turn off the lights. Whatever you're using 30% or less electricity, they can continue with their same habits, and it's a pain-free way to decrease electrical usage by, whatever that percentage is.
Right.
But you can't, you can't have your cake and eat it too, and it turns out that they're very unhealthy.
Well, I question that only because that's my job to do so, but it sounds to me like it's an engineering problem that we could provide. What do you think of LED lights? That's my question, because they seem to be cheap, low heat, and
they are ever so much more energy efficient.
Okay, so you approve of those?
Well, yes, with a caveat.
Okay, very good, very good.
My experience of late has been that engineers can manage to make anything unsafe because there has still been no recognition of the fact that electrical pollution and high frequencies in general are unsafe. So they have started using pulse width modulation on these LED bulbs, which is a deliberate creation of a higher frequency signal. And I'm sure it has purposes in terms of making the bulbs burn more evenly or something. They have to have some reason that they're doing it.
Okay.
But I don't think it's entirely necessary, because they did used to make bulbs without it, and they seem to work all right.
Right.
But they do that now,
Yeah,
and so they may be a problem, some of them.
Well, we're going to have to follow up on that. I'm going right down your list here. Check to see if you have the newer old-style microwave. Personally, I threw mine out when I found out about them, but are you saying there's better versions than others?
Well, what they used to do with the microwave beam was that in order to cook at medium, the microwave beam in the 1 minute time would be off for 30 seconds and on for 30 seconds. So you'd hear it go on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off throughout the cooking time.
Okay.
Now, the newer style microwave beams have essentially what's a dimmer switch in there. And if you have a newer style microwave and you get Stetzer meter, you will be able to see, if you cook on medium, you put a glass of water in there, you will be able to see that it just shoots the electrical pollution levels through the roof. And that is what I meant by the new style microwave. The other thing, though, is that microwaves, especially as they age, tend to leak. I was just at a house where we had the HF35C, and we're measuring the transmissions from the microwave, and it was overloading the meter at about 10 feet away. Now, many people have them right over their stove, so they run it while they're cooking or standing there, or you got to put your face against the glass to watch the popcorn pop or whatever it is you do. And that probably is unsafe.
No, that's horrible. I mean, I'm so glad that my grandmother, God rest her soul, she refused to use them. And not knowing, I mean, she was not a very educated woman, especially in the area of electricity, but she instinctively said, I'm not going to go use a microwave oven. And thank God she didn't. Turns out Grandma was right.
Yep. Do you mind if we kind of skip to the discussion briefly of what's going on with smart meters in the state?
Not at all. Let me just blow through some of these solutions real quick because I found some of them interesting. Only use laptops on battery. Boy, that's an important one. I just unplugged my computer. I generally do that anyhow, but I did not know that they generate a large amount of dirty power, and the transformer on the cord just generates a very large field. Thank you for, thank you for letting us know.
So you want to make sure you unplug the wall end.
Unplug the wall end. Oh, geez, that's...
Because it's not just unplugging it from your computer, it's where it comes from the wall to the box. It's the box in the middle of that cord.
Oh, that's it. Okay, thank you.
That makes that huge field.
I was just unplugging just the thing from my laptop, and now see, this is where an education helps. My goodness, you just saved me a lot of health issues this year. Okay, and now eliminate exposure to transmitted radio frequencies. What kind of radio frequencies?
Well, that was where we talked about unplugging all your wireless stuff.
Okay.
Or turning it off.
Use a microsurge meter to check for other polluting or malfunctioning electrical devices. Where can we get a microsurge meter? Just Google it and find some source?
Actually, if you go to electricalpollution.com and you scroll down the news page, you'll get to a point where there's some links.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
I don't sell them.
No, of course.
I've got the links up there.
God forbid you should ever get money for all your service for, basically to humanity here. Okay, now eliminate sources of arcing, very high frequencies. You have an electrical inspection for eliminating loose or poor connections. Just so... to talk about that very briefly, because it's so important. Most people kind of think you put your electrical system in and you ignore it forever. But really you should be, every few years you should go through and make sure that the electrical connections are tight in your box, maybe tight in your, various receptacles. If you're plugging in a plug into your outlet, and that plug sags or wiggles or, does all kinds of fun tricks when you put it in instead of a nice firm connection, that outlet needs to be replaced. It's actually a fire hazard. Okay. And
because there's a micro-arcing in there, and if it gets bad enough, it'll actually start a fire. But in the meantime, it's bad for you.
Boy, I don't want to cut you off because I know you wanted to go on to smart meters. Please, I guess people go to Catherine's website, electricalpollution.com. Look under the solutions page. You'll find everything we've discussed in writing with links galore. Okay, Catherine, please go on because you had an important point to make about smart meters.
I had a very important point about the smart meters. There has been a group of citizens in Madison that has filed a petition with the PSC to get an opt-out program. Up until this point, people who heard about the smart meters causing health problems and figured out that they were causing health problems for themselves couldn't get anything done. We just got 22 complaints from the Public Service Commission through an open records request, and they ranged from bladder cancer to heart arrhythmias and so forth. And universally, those people were given the same response that they're FCC approved, we have no control over, what equipment the utility uses, and too bad, so sad. And it's obviously not causing any problem for you, so we're not doing anything.
Catherine.
And that was the end of what people could do, because the Public Service Commission, unfortunately, in the state of Wisconsin, is the only one that you can go to on this.
Is that the one that you sent me, that article? What was the name? Did you start this, or did another gentleman start this, or?
Well, so what's happened is that these people have filed a petition, and as part of their petition, they want an opt-out program, a statewide opt-out program. So if you go to the electricalpollution.com, I don't have it up yet, but I do have a link to, if you go on the transmitting meter page, there's a Wisconsin link, and that link is to stopsmartmeterswisconsin.wordpress.com. And all the information about what's going on with smart meters in Wisconsin will be up on that page, at least eventually. That's not my web page. It's another woman who's working very hard on this issue. And
what's her name?
Her name is Shar.
Oh, Shar. Okay. Yeah, my goodness, I thought.
She's been doing a lot of work, and one of the efforts that we are all working on is this opt-out, because at a very minimum, people who are having health problems and know they're having health problems, or who are concerned about having health problems, should be able to opt out. We're also working on getting legislation, so if you contact your legislator, after you look up stopsmartmeterswisconsin.wordpress.com, and ask that they support having a utility meter, a transmitting utility meter opt-out. And preferably, I mean, really what should be happening, because of all of the health problems that these are causing nationwide, there should be a moratorium on the installation of these transmitting utility meters, and really there should be a rollback. But at a minimum, people who are experiencing problems from them should be allowed to opt out of having one on their own home. Because that's really, I mean, no person should be able to force you to have a meter or a device on your home that is making you sick.
Of course.
And in fact, there's enough leeway in the statutes that the PSC could do something about this on their own without being forced to if they wanted, but they haven't wanted. So it's now time, you know, we are the people who are responsible for the government in Wisconsin, and we need to let our legislators know that this needs to happen.
Indeed. I would hope anybody listening to today's show got an earful, became more educated on this topic. It's absolutely incredible. And one thing I'm encouraged about, there's another gentleman here who he's in Milwaukee, and he feels he has the same sentiment as you and Shar does. I can't remember her exact name, Charles Sassfras or something. But how do you pronounce it?
Charles Zafus.
Zafus. Yes, I've been in contact with her because I want to get all you guys together. Definitely we need to link this movement and make it a movement. Ray is the gentleman here in Milwaukee. He's been complaining about this for quite some time, and another friend told me about him, and so I thought I'm going to point him your way. So if you guys get a call or whatever, just know.
Great.
I mean, no, definitely. That's what it's all about here. It's amazing that, I mean, it's kind of sad that it's a handful of people like us that seem to be taking up the whole cause of this situation, and there's not much support yet. But you've been plugging at it and will continue to plug at it, and maybe we'll make a difference. One thing, this gentleman, I wanted to have him contact you is because he was talking about somewhere in, where was it, in California, they actually were successful with their opt-out program.
They're still working on it. It's a work in progress, but it is happening, and there have been a number of municipalities in California that have taken a look at the data on the public health risk that they'd be assuming with putting in these smart meters, and they have actually outlawed the installation.
Oh, yay.
And there are now at least 14 different states with opt-out programs of some sort, and really there should be a moratorium. The American Academy of Environmental Medicine has called for a moratorium on the installation of smart meters, and then they came out with a paper talking about, you know, all the people who shouldn't have them, and really, in order to comply with all the people who shouldn't have them, they just shouldn't be installed. they should not be installed, and they should be uninstalling them, because the list contained everything from pregnant women to people with heart problems to people with cancer and everything, neurological disorders. So by the time you go down, and each of those people, not only should they not have one, but their neighbors really shouldn't have them, because one of the things that people have been finding is that, okay, maybe they can get their meter off, but then the entire neighborhood is still flooded with this radiation.
Right, what's the point?
And they're still sick. They may be better, not as bad as they were, but it's still a problem. So,
Catherine, we're coming up to the end of the hour and the end of today's show, but I wanted to ask you, was there any other last-minute points you wanted to get out there?
Well, I guess my last point would be anybody who's interested in keeping abreast of this issue, please do check out my website. And you can also email me at webmaster@electricalpollution.com. If you want to be getting updates, you can put the join email in the subject heading, and I can put you on the list. So.
Thank you very much. People, please make note of that. Again, we've been talking with Catherine Kleiber, longtime activist against this cause, which sounds to be the cause of many of our physical and mental ailments here, and doctors, quite frankly, aren't taking note of it. It's not even one of their list of considerations. Catherine continues to promote this cause and awareness here in Wisconsin. You can go to her website, electricalpollution.com. In the future, we're going to hook her up, Pam Jafke, and a few others, and just see what we can do as a joint effort to promote more awareness of this debilitating concern. I'm Michael Wordsworth. Catherine, we want to thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me on.
We'd love to have you back again, actually, and see if we can't at least bring up some news. I think this is an issue that needs to be revisited from time to time. Otherwise, it's just going to lose attention in the forefront of our consciousness.
Well, thank you. I would look forward to that.
So would we. So would we. Thank you for everybody that's been listening today. I hope you caught this. This would, boy, for the price of nothing, all you had to do is listen, and you might have freed yourself of many health conditions. I'm Michael Wordsworth. These have been words worth listening to. I'm breaking down the news. We're going to say goodbye to Catherine and have her back as soon as we can. Thank you again, Catherine.
Well, thank you.
And goodbye to you. Take care.
Take care.
Well, you heard it there. Indeed. This has been very amazing. I'm Michael Wordsworth. We're going to pull out here at the top of the hour. Thank you for listening today.